I think one very important reason you would play Jinteki and Polana right now as opposed to engineering the future in HB is that the ice is way more painful to face check. Sure, there's Architect in HB, but that's about it. Your Eli, your IQ, most of HB ice is generally not very painful to face check. You can click through them. But for Jinteki, it's a lot worse because it almost always entails net damage. So as I was sifting through my ice in my Polana deck, trying to refine it again and again, I quickly realized that I've been spending 10 influence on my ice. That made me think, instead of playing Eli's and little engines, why don't I just swap it all for the Grail ice suite? I did mention earlier, I think that's my business first review, that Grail is going to be a big thing right now. Or my most wanted list review, sorry, yes. Because with less shapers on the horizon, Grail will suddenly become very good. And I haven't actually been dabbling with it, so I decided to give it a try here. And as you see, I'm playing all the Grail ice with Marcus Batty, which it synergizes very well with. Today I'm up against a noise deck, and this is going to be a competitive game. You can bet your lives on it. So, I keep my opening hand, not the most spectacular ice, but with double Nisei, I can't say no. You really need those aggressive agendas. It's like Astroscript in NBN. You want to see them early, and you're going to protect HQ anyway, which is exactly what I do here. So he gets an early Lamprey, but he cannot punish me for it. And even if he wants to, I do have a Cyberdex ready to defend against it. Now he gets a wild side out, that's fine. I still don't have Enderrun Ice, but because he checked R&D and saw the Excalibur, he knows I'm on Grail, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, I'm going to ice up R&D with my only other viable ice, which is Merlin, and hope that nothing too bad happens. It's not going to be something that I really want to res, but this is something I want to res. It's a Komainu when he has 6 cards in hand. I'm more than happy to do him the favor of clearing his hand. 6 net damage coming your way, you better hope you had worse. That's a Charizard down the bin, that's a Faust down the bin, that's a Lamprey in the bin, that's a Parasite in the bin, Deja Vu is gone. That is a humongous tempo hit. However, being the smart runner that he is, he's gonna hit my hand for the next 3 clicks. With 2 Niseis in hand, I can't be feeling very good about this. I'm really hoping he hits the Cyberdex here so I don't have to res it. He can purge his Lamprey for me. That doesn't happen. Instead, he accesses my Batty, which he trashes, and I think he accesses the Jackson, which he cannot afford to trash. I think that's an okay start for me. At least I didn't lose both the Niseis. If he hit both Niseis, I would be a very sad panda, and this game would be all but over. Thankfully, that I get to keep the Nisei, and basically, at this point, I'm forced to toss the Nisei into the remote. 2 reasons. Firstly, because he can still run through the Komainu and ditch the 2 cards in his hand, maybe even draw more cards if he drew an I've had worse. Secondly, there's extra incentive to run HQ because he has the Lamprey. So I definitely expected him to run HQ this turn, and he didn't, so that's fine. I cannot defend the Nisei in the remote. It's an Excalibur into Nisei. If he ran that remote, he would have gotten that Nisei, no questions asked. I was forced to do this because, yeah, the Nisei was safer in the remote than it was in the hands, strangely enough. Now, I'm getting a couple credits, draw a couple cards, and I have the 3rd Nisei in my hand as well. Goodness me. Goodness gracious me. Well, not much I can do here. I'm just going to install the Cyberdex on HQ to force him to purge the Lamprey if he runs into HQ. This leaves him with very little incentive to actually run HQ. Which is quite important because I do not want him hitting my HQ and trashing my Jackson and stealing my final Nisei. That is not something I can accept. So he starts getting a Street Peddler out, and this has me very worried. Because with instant speed tutors, you have to respect the fact that he could instantly destroy my Komainu at the start of his turn, because it's on 1 strength. So with that in mind, I'm going to ice up HQ again here. Sure, it telegraphs that I have something important in hand, but I think this is a logical move from anyone who is vulnerable to an instant Parasite. So the Yagura goes on HQ. It's not the best location for Yagura, but again, if he had a Parasite on the Street Peddler, you can bet that he would liberate it onto the Komainu happily for 1 mil and 1 annoying ice down the drain. Found my Caprice, that's very good news. This means that it can go in the server, and I'll continue gaining credits here. And I was very tempted to advance this here. Excalibur into Caprice is one of the strongest combos in the game. The problem is, one of the strongest runner archetype right now plays Faust, and Faust gets through Excalibur very easily. So I think it's safer at this point to place the Lancelot on the server. I cannot place my lives in the hands of 4 Caprice side games. That's just not gonna happen. So as I said, the Parasite does come out into the Komainu, meaning that it's going to go down next turn, but that's fine. It has served its purpose. 6 net damage is more than I can ask for. So I found the Batty in addition to the Caprice, so this is probably time to start scoring the Nisei. No more time for dilly-dallying. Yeah, so I advance Nisei here and prepare to score it next turn. With 10 credits, I should be able to defend the remote by rezzing either Lancelot or Excalibur, along with both the Caprice and the Batty. Getting that first Nisei out is so important because it allows me to score the second one in my hand. And I need to score that pretty soon because HQ is thinning down. He is starting to destroy all my eyes on HQ. Notice that he's pretty passive when it comes to running R&D, which works very well in my favor because at this point I still do not want to rest the Merlin. I'm not the richest runner. You can see he's milling all my economy. That restructure went down in the bin. Now he's running my HQ and threatening my economy once more with double Lamprey. I'm happy to see that. This means that he's going to get purged. I first rest the Yagura. The Yagura could be parasited, but he chooses to let it fire, which is fine. I snipe an irrelevant card, and I see a Caprice on top of R&D, which I keep there, just in case he destroys the Caprice on my remote. Okay, so he goes through, and he can decide whether to access my hand or the Cyberdex first. He doesn't know it's a Cyberdex, of course. And here he liberates an imp of a peddler and chooses to access my upgrade first, which was a huge mistake. Because it could be a Cyberdex, and yeah, because of this, he cannot use imp now. So that was a mistake on his part, and but double Lamprey still triggers, but he cannot imp my Jackson. He would have loved to imp it right here, but now he's forced to pay money for it, which he doesn't. Instead, he lets me keep the Jackson, but he gets to play the Parasite from his hand to kill the Yagura on HQ. Now, I know that double Lamprey is in the bin, so I'm not very concerned about him installing Lamprey and running my hand to bankrupt me. So this is why I'm able to score the first Nisei. If I suspected the Lamprey threat, I would ice up HQ instead. This is because he can easily run HQ many times with Lamprey and then threaten my remote and kill my Caprice and Batty, which is the last thing I want. So that can't happen. Even though I'm playing Polana, I'm pretty poor. You'll notice that I don't have that many credits to my name. Now he does something very smart here. Knowing that I've just purged him with Cyberdex, he goes for Archives to check it. Because he knows that once he begins installing more viruses like Data Sucker, Parasite, more Lampreys, he won't want to run Archives ever again. And I could install the Jackson from my hand, which he knows is still there. So, as I said, he now installs the Data Sucker, runs my hand so he can collect Sucker tokens, sees the Jackson, again he's on exactly 3 credits, chooses not to trash it. Because he probably had something important to do with his money. I don't really agree with this, but because he can sell the imp on the table next turn for another 3 credits. You really don't want to give your opponent Jacksons. So I show him my hand here, and because I showed him the Nisei Mark II, I'm forced to place it in the remote. At least I can defend the Nisei here because of my sturdy remote, which he cannot afford to face check at this point. I'm not going to be able to score the Nisei next turn, but it's fine. Again, the Nisei is safer in the remote than it is in HQ, because, again, if he installs a Lamprey here, he's incentivized to run HQ 3 times, kill my Jackson, and possibly ninja my Nisei from my hand. So, he plays a Deja Vu here. What does he get? He gets a Levy to Levy. Apparently, I sniped it off with net damage earlier on, so the Deja Vu was pretty... Or he may have peddled his Levy away. In any case, now he gets a second run through of his deck, and which is a problem for me because this means that I need to close out the game quicker because now he has the potential to mill me out with 1 whole deck's worth of viruses. So here I install a whole bunch of cards in the remote. Actually not a whole bunch, I just installed the Breaker Bay Grid, which is worth 2 credits because I can res a Caprice with it. Then I advanced Nisei and I installed the Jackson that he knows was in my hand. So I have a naked Jackson sitting on the table right now. Which is fine because I plan to use the Jackson to recycle a Jackson in the bin along with some other cards. He finds his Grimoire and Cash. Grimoire is actually a pretty bad card for my particular deck because I have so many 1 strength eyes. Komainu is 1 strength, Galahad is 1 strength. He doesn't contest my remote once more, even though he found the files, he respects the fact that I have a Nisei Mark II and a bunch of Caprice and Excalibur. So he knows that it's rather pointless, a futile effort, so he goes for the mill instead. Which again doesn't do much because there's a Jackson on the table. So I'm quite happy that I actually got 2 Nisei Mark II tokens now. This is going to be pretty huge. He mills a Future Perfect and goes for R&D. Do I rest Merlin here? I really don't want to. I really don't want to. I see that he has a Faust. It will only cost him 3 cards to break with Merlin. To break with Faust. So I say nope. It's not worth it. If I could tax 4 cards, it probably is worth it. 3 cards, not so much. And what I was really looking to do here, more importantly, was to score the food next turn. I didn't care what he was going to see on R&D as long as I get to pump out the food in my remote next turn. Well, that plan's down the drain because he stole the 1 in 4 food from my hand. That was my win. That was the game for me. If I got the food in the remote, I would have instantly won the game because I have 2 Nisei Mark II tokens and a Caprice. Even without any ice, his chances of winning were next to 0. That changes everything. I should have won at that point. I could let him into R&D to medium dig me as deep as he wants. There's very little chance of him winning. Now things have changed. I'm gonna use Jackson here because this increases the probability of me finding my future perfect. Now that I'm gonna shuffle it back in, if I can top deck the future perfect or another global food, I could still replicate the win next turn. So this is what I'm gonna do here. Reshuffle the Jackson and the future perfect. I do have another Jackson in my hand, so I can dig through my deck if I need to. And looks like I do need to. So I'm gonna put the Jackson in the safe remote. I'm not gonna use the remote until I find a 3-pointer to score. Double draw with Jackson, that's my 3-pointer, found it. I'm gonna Merlin HQ. This could be a mistake, but the reason I put Merlin on HQ here was because I was suspecting that he would draw into a Lamprey or Sucker, and that would incentivize HQ running. And sure enough, I knew he would run HQ, he does. So the Merlin helps a lot here, because otherwise he would just hammer my HQ and potentially imp away my future perfect. That would be a disaster. So, Merlin fires off. This time I'm definitely going to force him to pay 3 cards. I have to, because otherwise he'll just run my hand for the next few clicks. So force him to chuck his David, which was a good idea by him, because I'm not running any ice that's 5 strength or higher. And what does he see? He sees a Chrysium Grid. Chrysium Grid. Imp. It goes in the bin. Not very relevant for me. I'm not gonna use Chrysium in this matchup. And great, he spends his he runs R&D. I'm definitely not resing it here. I am looking to win via the future perfect next turn, so I do not have time to entertain R&D ice resing. Merlin is way too expensive for me to res at this point. Alright, again, I'm trying to win the game as quickly as I can here. He's on 4 agenda points, which is very scary, because if he finds the last future perfect in my R&D, there's 1 more future perfect somewhere in my deck. If he finds it, he wins. If he doesn't find it, and I can score the future perfect, I probably win, because there are only there's 1 more global food and 1 corporate sales team left in my deck. No, 1 global food. Yep. Oh, that's very few agendas. I must be missing something. There are 8 agendas in my deck. There are 3. Yep. There are 3 more agendas left in my deck. 1 future perfect and 2 2-pointers. The food and the sales team. He needs to either find the 1 future perfect to win, or the 2 2-pointers to win. So basically, his only real shot of winning at this point is to find a future perfect, one of which is in my hand. So he misclicks there. He doesn't run my remote. He runs R&D instead. Again, I trust my R&D to hold up, because as I said, as long as he doesn't hit the future perfect, I probably win. And if he steals either the corporate sales team or food, I don't really care. At this point, those agendas are irrelevant to me. The food might be relevant, but that's about it. Doesn't really matter because I have the winning agenda in my hand. All I need to do is to find some breathing room to score it. So he rampages over my R&D for 3 clicks, finds a Breaker Bay, trashes it, finds a fast track, imps it, finds 1 more card, and here I make a misplay, very minor misplay. Knowing that I'm going to put the future perfect in the remote next turn, I should Jackson R&D. If I use Jackson here, I could potentially draw into one of my agendas, leaving R&D safer. And yeah, basically decrease R&D agenda density. Either way, I'm going to use Jackson, right? Actually no. I'm going to play the restructure first. I need the money to guarantee that I can score the future perfect. Probably a misplay. Yeah, I think I could have just scored the future perfect right here. This was potentially a misplay. With 2 Nisei tokens, the chance of him getting through my remote was next to 0. Yes, I should have tried to score the future perfect here. That was a misplay. If I scored the future perfect here, I would have... okay, maybe not. Yeah. So basically, I had too few credits. That was the biggest problem. I only had about 11 credits to play with if I decided to go for the future perfect in the remote, which meant that I had to basically rely on solely Caprice and the two Nisei tokens, which was a very dangerous prospect. But instead, he does something very smart here. He runs my remote and forces me to play the Batty and Caprice side games. I first fire the Batty as he is encountering the Excalibur, and here's another gameplay mistake. I should have fired the Batty when he was encountering the Lancelot, not the Excalibur. If I fire it when he encountered the Lancelot, I could trash his programs, I would trash his Faust and his Imp, and I would do 2 net damage from Merlin. The 2 extra net damage would help a lot. Instead, now I'm keeping him out with Caprice and Betty. He actually loses the Betty side game, which trashes the Faust, but he wins the Caprice side game, which means I have to keep him out with one of my tokens. Now, he's not allowed to run on my remote anymore because of Excalibur, but that doesn't matter, because now he installs 2 parasites from his hand. And this is why I say this was a misplay. If I Bettied him on the Lancelot and I fired off the 2 net damage, it would probably hit one of the parasites, and this wouldn't happen. Instead, now I have to contend with the fact that both my eyes are going to die in very short order. This is bad. This is really, really bad. What do I do here? We are back to square one. We really are. It's back to square one where I have to try to win with just the Future Perfect and the Nisei token and the Caprice Nisei. Remember, one turn ago I was contemplating placing the Future Perfect in the remote instead of playing Restructure. We are back to that state. Ice is irrelevant here. It's all about the Caprice side games and the Nisei tokens. Thankfully, I did have 2 Nisei tokens the last time, but this time I only have 1. So I have a lot less wiggle room. I really should have scored the Future Perfect on that Restructure turn. That was kind of a mistake. I should have placed trust in my double Nisei tokens. Double Nisei is so strong. It's so strong. Instead, now I'm in a very tenuous position. The good news is I can force 1 click from him. He's forced to spend 1 click to play the data sucker so that he can get through my remote. So this only leaves him 3 clicks to run. He needs to win 2 out of 3 Caprice side games because I have 1 Nisei token. The first side game, I bid 0, he bids 1. That's a fail. He needs to win the next 2 side games in succession. I'm gonna bid 2 here, he bids a 0, so that's game. I do have enough money to score the Future Perfect, and whatever he does this last turn, I'm gonna just fire off the Nisei token because I can. Doesn't matter what he does here. So this is the power of Caprice Nisei and the Nisei token. I should have used them on the Restructure turn instead of dawdling on with the Restructure, and as a result he was able to res the ice on my remote, force the reses, and pop the parasites for massive damage. I still won, but it was a lot more harrowing this way. It really came down to the side games, and well, this time I came out ahead. Might not always be the case. How the hell did I manage to win that game? That is pretty insane. Some of you observant people might have just noticed, but I had 0 end the run ice the entire game, and I still won. That's insane. That's crazy. For a deck that tries to win by agenda points instead of flatlining, I didn't see an end the run the entire game, yet I still managed to keep my server safe. Granted, the end the runs came in the form of the Caprice Nisei and Nisei Mark II. Well, ice is useless nowadays, so you have to turn to these other methods to end the run for the runner. Instead, what my ice does is to threaten, to serve as a deterrent, not as the hard stopper. By deterring the runner, by saying you cannot run because it's too scary, there's too much net damage and potential program trashing floating around, he just couldn't afford to run. That's exactly what Grail did. So even though Faust seems like a good counter to Grail, because all you need is to slap down the 1 Faust to nullify all my Grail ice to be able to break through all of them, he still has to worry about the fact that every time he initiates a run, he must be mentally prepared to lose his entire hand to Grail ice. Because once you see 2 net damage subroutines and program trashing subroutines, you have to break them. So you must always be prepared to lose cards from your hand. And by losing cards from your hand and dropping down to maybe 1 or 2 cards left in hand at the end of your turn, you're opening yourself to a lot of vulnerabilities, be it hitting a snare, or opening a huge scoring window for me next turn, because I can then score in a remote, and they won't have enough cards to get through that remote next turn. So this is the real potential of Faust, and not to mention its synergy with Marcus Batty. As you saw this game, my trashing of his files meant that that was not an option. Using files to contest my remotes. He was forced to use parasites, which is good, admittedly, but you can see how Betty program trashing files could have easily changed the wins of this game if I actually saw a Grail ahead. I would have completely come out of the server. He wouldn't be able to place the parasite on my Excalibur, which was the innermost ice. I would have just ended the run right there after killing his Faust. So Grail is so good against Faust, even though a single Faust can break through all three, in fact all four of the Grail ice, including Excalibur. Now some of you, I know you all are very excited to try out new cards and say, play your freaking Mambat City Grid. It's shouting, it's screaming to be included in this deck with Komainus and Grail Ice. Why aren't you playing Mambat City Grid? Look at this game. Just look. I mean, I don't even have to explain myself. If you have observed this game, you would have came to the same conclusion as me. Mambat City Grid would not have worked this game. Why? The only situation where Mambat City Grid would trigger was with that final remote, the glance slot into the Excalibur with only one Grail Ice in hand, the Merlin. It would not have done what Caprice did, which was to secure the remote for me to win with the Future Perfect. Mambat City Grid would not have ended the run. He would have been able to steal the Future Perfect from the remote to win the game. Mambat City Grid would not have done what Marcus Petty did, which was to destroy his files so that his only other option was Parasite. If I had a Mambat City Grid in that instance instead of Marcus Petty, he would still have his files, which meant that he would still have been able to contest the remote on the turn where I got my Future Perfect out. He would still have been able to parasite down the Lancelot, and once he parasites down the Lancelot, the Mambat City Grid would do absolutely nothing except to, well, because the only ice left on the server would be the Excalibur. Mambat City Grid would be useless, and if anything, he would have been able to easily run through my remote, because all he needs to do is to pay one card each time to break the Excalibur subroutine with Faust. So yes, sure, the Lancelot at the end there would have gained, what, 2 more subroutines thanks to Mambat City Grid. It wouldn't have won me the game. And that was the main problem, because Mambat City Grid is a combo card that relies on actually having Grail Ice in the remote and, more importantly, Grail Ice in your hand. This game, it so happened that I didn't actually draw into my Grail Ice. I did, but I kept having to replace the Grail Ice on my Centrals because he was burning them down. So Mambat City Grid is not good for that very reason. The fact that it's so difficult to assemble a proper remote with at least 2 or 3 pieces of ice and still have leftover ice in your hand to trigger off Grail Ice. It is too combo-tastic, and that is something very bad. It doesn't lend well to the consistency of the deck. Sure, it could lead to complete blowouts where you get a 10 subroutine Komainu or a Lancelot with 7 subroutines. That is completely something that very few runners can deal with. But for every blowout situation, there will probably be at least 2 or 3 games where you wish you had a Marcus Betty instead. Yes, you can play all 3 Caprice Bettys and City Grids. However, that's just card slots that you're giving up for money or ice. You still need ice to win games. You still need money to win the game. And this game, clearly, I will barely manage to win by having just enough money and just enough ice to keep my Centrals afloat. So Mambat City Grid is definitely a no-go. It's still, but the concept of Grail Ice is still very solid, and is something that I'm going to continue experimenting with as a competitive deck. Thanks for watching, and happy night running. Goodbye.